Hey everybody, Steven here, and today I'm showcasing something I've wanted to do for a couple of years now, which is build an ITX rig. Now for this, I didn't go new with every part of it as it's replacing my second rig in the house, so my SSDs aren't new outside of one M.2, and I haven't gotten my hands on an RTX 3080 yet, so my GTX 1080 Ti is the GPU I'm using. Now for the parts, I've decided to go with the Ryzen 3800X, which from a performance standpoint compared to the 3700X doesn't make sense because it only offers 3 to 5% increased performance, but it was actually cheaper at the time I purchased it than the 3700X by $60. So I'm sure those buying PC parts off of Amazon and other online retailers have noticed the huge fluctuation in prices based on availability, and throw holiday sales on top of that, and it created some weird prices on top of an already weird year, with parts being hard to find due to shortages from everyone working from home and needing computers. For the motherboard, I went with a Gigabyte B550OI Horus Pro AX motherboard with PCIe 4, dual M.2 slots, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and 5 USB ports on the back. For the RAM, I went with two 16GB HyperX Fury Black 3000 MHz sticks for 32 gigs total. This was something I wanted to get right as the case I chose only has a 45mm RAM height clearance, which brings us to the main attraction, which is the NZXT H1 case. This is a case I originally wanted to make my main rig at the house with, but due to it being sold out for a good while, I went with the H710i instead. This is an incredible case that features a built-in 650 watt power supply, AIO water cooler, and all of the cables pre-routed so everything fits in perfectly. These are still extremely popular and are sold out again on Amazon and the NZXT website as of the recording of this video, so I'm glad I got my hands on one. The case before installing my parts weighs 14.4 pounds and is made of solid material with a glass panel on the front to showcase the inside, a back panel with holes for airflow, and the sides which are metal with holes for airflow and filters on both sides that can be removed. The case has stickers placed on it that give step-by-step guidance on how to unpack the case and get set up for installing your components. Once you take off all of the panels, you will find inside the case itself a box full of all the different things that you will need. So we have the power supply cable with this, you have tie-offs, you have the Intel or AMD bracket for the water cooler, and then you're going to find screws as well that you can use for different points, like for instance screwing in your motherboard to the actual case itself. So first I installed my CPU, RAM, and M.2 drive on the motherboard before installing it in the case, which has 4 screws and was quite easy to get set up. The way the radiator and water cooler is set up is quite unique, where you actually just undo these screws and then flop it back so that it's out of the way and you can actually now place your motherboard where you need to. Luckily they have styrofoam in certain places to make sure nothing gets damaged while you're doing all of this. So first I moved all the cables out of the way and then slid the motherboard into the proper place, made sure I had my screws ready to go, and then fastened that to the case before doing anything else. Next I plugged in the power cable for the CPU, that way I wouldn't have to do it later when there's a bunch of stuff in the way. I then switched out the Intel bracket for the AMD one on the water cooler, which comes with preset thermal paste, which is how NZXT's other water coolers come, and makes installation that much easier. I will say, with the space being a little tighter, it was slightly more difficult to get it installed on the motherboard, so I'm glad the thermal paste was already on, otherwise I would have gotten it everywhere. Once it was screwed down, I plugged in the fan and the pump. I actually ended up plugging these in backwards, so the fan is the thicker cable, just a heads up. I was expecting that to be the other way around, so the fan didn't actually come on when I first booted up the PC, leading to high CPU temps obviously, which was making me nervous as the BIOS was saying the fan was spinning at over 3000 RPM, but after taking off the glass panel I could see it wasn't spinning at all. So I got the case pulled apart again and switched those cables really quick, and then my temps went from the 70s to 90s down to the 40s to 60s, so it wasn't that big of an issue, but I did want to make sure that people were aware of which cable needs to be plugged in where. So after getting the motherboard installed, I ran the power cables and panel connections, which once again NZXT has done a phenomenal job with cable management in this case. I then connected the GPU cable to the motherboard and barely got my 1080 Ti to fit, but I did check before ordering the case to make sure it would, and I recommend everyone does that for their RAM and GPU so you don't run into problems. Next, I installed my two 2.5-inch SSDs into the drive bay. There are only 2 slots. In my mind, I originally thought there was 3, there's only 2, so I had to ditch one of my SSDs. Keep that in mind. One last minute addition was a 1TB M.2 drive, which actually installs on the back of the motherboard and sits right underneath the GPU. A quick side note, if you do get this case, make sure you turn on the power supply unit before you put the panels back on, as you can't access it without taking the panels off. After I turned on the power supply unit, I slid the side panels back on, clipped in the front and the back panels, and I was ready to go. One small gripe: if you've watched any of the other videos on this case, for some reason NZXT still puts stickers on the glass, and whatever glue that they're using for these, or adhesive that they're using for these, kind of sticks to the case when you peel them off, so you usually have to actually scrape that off. I do wish they would change that, but that's one small minor gripe, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it. And there it is. So once I was done, I did want to showcase really quick the bottom. This is where you will find all of your ports, so everything kind of runs underneath and then out of the back of the case. So there we have it. I am extremely happy with the final product. I love this case. Now with this, I do want to cover a couple of things that I haven't mentioned yet. One of the first ones is going to be the top and what ports you're going to find on the case. So on the front, you will find one USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C, one USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type-A, and one 4-pole headset audio jack. I personally use a lot of USB ports. I would have liked if the case had one more on the front, but luckily my motherboard comes with plenty, so it's not that big of an issue. Plus, I can always use a splitter if I need to. The space on the bottom of the case kind of limits that, but I always have workarounds if I need to use them. So one last thing I want to cover is my previous case, the Phanteks Intho Evolve. This is going to be a size comparison. I was surprised when I actually finally put them side by side how big that ATX case is. It seems like volume wise, you could probably fit 3 of the NZXT H1 inside of the Phanteks case. So one of the big changes is the Phanteks case was so big, I wouldn't put it on top of the desk. I'd actually put it on a board underneath the desk. This case is so small that I can actually leave it on the desk, and it's now a highlight of my whole setup versus just kind of being hidden almost underneath. And to finish everything out, I want to talk about performance really quick. Now, I don't have the latest 3000 series GPU. Hopefully I can get my hands on one in the coming months, but the 1080 Ti is still a really good GPU. And performance has been great. I haven't had any issues. Temperatures get up into the low 70s with this. Now, when you're looking at this, you have the holes on either side and then the back. When you put your hand on the GPU side, because essentially the air is being drawn from the bottom and then through the sides and then kind of blowing out the back, it seems like. With this, the GPU side, if you put your hand on the metal, it does get a little bit hot. Now on the CPU side, it doesn't really get that hot, but the GPU side does have a tendency to get a little bit warmer. Now apparently there's an issue right now that a couple Reddit users have reported where there's some type of screw in the case that creates some type of spark, and the case is actually caught on fire. It started smoking. I reached out to NZXT. They are looking into it right now. It's only been a couple users out of all the cases that they've sold, but they are currently working on a replacement kit to send out to everybody. Something to be mindful of. Probably in the future, probably a couple months from now, it won't be an issue at all, as they will just solve this in-house, so you won't need the kit. But if you do have the case already, you might want to reach out to NZXT and get your name on the list of people that they need to send this kit to once it's ready to go. Personally, I'm not worried about it, as this has only happened with a couple people that own the case out of the thousands and thousands that they've sold. This is very regularly sold out, both on their website and on Amazon. So it's one of those cases that it's actually harder to get because the demand is so high. So with this is the second rig, as I've mentioned in the house. This isn't my main rig, so I actually turn this off when I'm done with it and I'm not using it versus just leaving it on all the time. So with all of that being said, I'm extremely happy with the case. I love the look of it. The performance is great. I'm so happy with my first ITX build. And in the future, I want to potentially go down that route for my main rig, maybe try another case like the ROG one that they have out there. We'll see with that one, but that's going to be it for this one, everybody. If you have questions, let me know in the comment section. Maybe there's something that I didn't cover or you were just curious about in regards to the case. If you liked the video, hit the like button for me. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. Thanks so much for watching.